All right, welcome to you all. I'm gonna try this out and see how it works. Feels a little weird talking to an empty room and talking to a camera instead, but hey, get you something as far as a math lesson here. My goal is to share a joke with you all before we start for each one, and they may or may not have something to do with the coronavirus. So here is the first one. Hopefully you got that. All right, so I'm going to do my best to make this make sense. It's no guarantee that it will work out very well, but we're going to try it. So today's lesson, it's lesson 78. It's called the products of square roots, which pretty much is talking about products is multiplying. It's your answer when you multiply it. And taking your square roots, such as the square root of 49 is 7, and then obviously we're going to take some that don't equal out to a whole number, and then multiply them together, and we can get simplified answers. It's pretty much taking so the square root of 10 doesn't come out evenly, but we can eventually start breaking that down and simplify it rather than just leaving it as a square root of 10. So today's main idea is this right here. A and B, you can put any random number in there. The square root of A times B is the same thing as the square root of A times B. So you can pull them apart. So for proof of that, over here on this side, the square root of 32, we don't know what that is. But the square root of 32 is equal to the square root of 16 times the square root of 2, because 16 times 2 is 32, but you can pull those apart and get an answer there. So what that actually comes down to is, you know what the square root of 16 is. The square root of 16 is 4. 4 times 4 equals 16. So that is the square root of 16. The square root of 2 does not come out evenly. So the way you would actually write that is literally 4 times the square root of 2. If you have a calculator, you can actually figure that out to a number that goes on for quite a while after the decimal point. But for simplified version, all you want is 4 times the square root of 2. Again, proof that any number, if you factor it, and then that is equal to this times this. Now, this works out really nice sometimes. This obviously you don't need to figure it out, because the square root of 36, you know, is 6. But just for proof, the square root of 36 is 6. It's also equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of 9, which the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 9 is 3. So 2 times 3 is equal to 6. It's just proof on that there. So if you turn the page and go to example 1 in your book, I'm going to switch to, I have my iPad here, and I'm going to try and share the screen, see how this works. Give me a little bit here while it connects. All right, so what you're looking at right now should be excuse the blinking 3 at the bottom, I don't know why it's doing that, but it is the example 1 in your book, and it's asking you that shape there on the coordinate plane that they have. It's asking you to figure out the area. So if you look at the very center of this drawing that I put here, that's the example that you have in your book. And obviously the way you figure it out, because it doesn't have an exact amount doesn't give you a measurement of the length and the width. So what you got to do is figure out how to figure out the sides. So the dotted lines that you have there would be using the Pythagorean Theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, will get us our answer. So if you look at the top right corner of this drawing that I have here, you are looking at figuring out the width, the shorter side. And it is 2 blocks high by 2 blocks wide for A and B. So you do 2 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared. 2 squared is 4, plus 2 squared is 4 again. So 4 plus 4 is 8. So therefore, 8 is equal to c squared. However, you need to use the radical sign and get rid of the exponent 2 on the c there. So your answer is c is equal to the square root of 8, which is your width, which you see w equals the square root of 8 is what I have written there. And then on the length side, you have if you draw dotted lines again there, you have 3 blocks high and 3 blocks wide for A and B. So 3 squared plus 3 squared is equal to c squared. 3 squared is 9 plus 9 again. So it's 18. 9 plus 9 is 18. And that is equal to c squared. So you have to, again, get rid of the exponent 2 there. So you square it with the radical sign. So the length is the square root of 18. Now, if you look at the bottom left corner there, the formula for a rectangle is length, or for the area of a rectangle is length times width. So what is the length? Jump up to the top left, and it is the square root of 18. What is the width? It's the square root of 8. So here is where you can actually start figuring this out. If you jump back to, probably can't see me, we're on the small screen on the side, but the main idea of today is the square root of a times b is equal to the square root of a times the square root of b. So 18 times 8 is equal to 144, which you know what the square root of 144 is, and that is 12. So the answer to the area of this rectangle here is 12, and your measurements is blocks squared. So that's how you can use the products of these radical signs and figure that out. So that was problem 1. I'm going to jump away from that screen there and actually jump to the example 2 here, which is up on the board. So it's kind of a two-headed question here. It's telling you to figure out the inside, which they're both squares, the inside square compared to the bigger square. And the way they have that question worded is the smaller square is what percent of the area of the bigger square. So in other words, it's going to be smaller because obviously there's gaps here. So it's going to be less than 100%. So if you figure this out, first of all, ask yourself the question, what is the area of the bigger square? Well, how many blocks is it? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a square, so it's 5 wide. So the area of the bigger square is 5 times 5, which is 25. So that is the area for the bigger one. Now the smaller one, you're like, well, how do I figure it out? Because these lines right here are not exact. Well, you can use a squared plus b squared. This is 2 blocks, and this is 1, 2, 3 blocks. So how do you figure that out? A squared, which is 2, 2 squared plus 3 squared. 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9. So 4 plus 9 is equal to c squared. 4 plus 9 is 13. And obviously you have to get rid of the exponent 2 there, so you square it. This side right here is c, the long side here. So that side is equal to the square root of 13. So you have to ask yourself the question now, what is the area of the smaller square? Well, how do you figure out the area of a square? You do side times side. So the square root of 13, this is a square, so this is also the square root of 13. The square root of 13 times the square root of 13, you can figure it out. It's like square root of 169, I believe. Yeah. Square root of 169, which you know that these two numbers, if you stick them together and then square it, it'll be 13. So your area for the smaller square is 13. That's the first part of this question. You figure out the area of both of them. Now you have to compare them. So I'll move it over here. So 13 is what percent of 25? Because that'll tell you. Well, if you put this over a fraction with 100, because that gives you a percent. 25 times 4, 13 times 4, 13 times 4 is 52. So your answer is 52 over 100. That written as a percent is 52%. So the smaller square is 52% of the bigger square, the area is. Now it's pretty much saying it's half of the bigger one, which if you figure it out is probably what it comes out to really close, just by looking at it. So the answer for number 2, using this thing here, the square root of a times b, figuring all that out, you can figure out the difference here and then here as well. All right, that pretty much wraps up the concept. It's not too difficult. It's going to be the biggest thing is when you run into this and then start comparing. I know we've had problems with the percent for a while, and so hopefully you can figure that out. So I'm going to jump over to this side, and hopefully you can still see fairly well as I work on the practice set over here. I'm going to do A through D, and E, F, and G are a little hard to just throw up on the board here, so I'm not going to do that. So A here, the square root of 2 times the square root of 14. I know they don't have a multiplication sign in between there, but whenever you stick two radicands there together, then and no sign in between, it's understood multiplying. So if we figure this out, the square root of 2 times the square root of 14, neither one of these come out evenly. So you can put this down to 2 times 14, which is 28. Now, what you can do is factor this, unless you know. So I can tell you that obviously the square root of 16, the next one is 25. The square root of 25 is in here because it's smaller, it's less than 28. So you know that you're going to pull a 5 out. So I'm just going to factor it because it'll be easier that way. So 28 factored down is 2 and 14 and 2 and 7. Great. So what's going to happen here is you have the square root of 2 times 2 times 7. I'm missing something here. 2. Nope, that's right. So well, you know that you can pull these apart. So the square root of 2 times 2 times 7, you know that 2 times 2, the square root is 4. So we pull that out. You find the groups of 2, pull the 4 out into here. What's left on the inside? 7. So the simplified answer for this right here is 4 times the square root of 7. Again, it's not, rather than putting a number with a decimal point that goes on for quite some time, this is a simplified version. It's a reason why we do this. So then B, 15 times 3 here, you get the square root of 45. We want it simplified. Obviously, if you put this in your calculator, it's not going to come out to an exact number. We want it a bit more simplified. So if we factor it out, the square root of 45 prime factored is 5 and 9. 9 goes down to 3 and 3. So you have 3 times 3 times 5. Right here's another group of 2. So simplified, your answer is 3 times 3, 9. 9 square rooted is 3. What's left inside? 5. So your simplified answer for this right here, 15, square root of 15 times square root of 3, is 3 times the square root of 5. Here we have another interesting one. So here you actually have a number that is outside the radical sign. You cannot do anything with numbers that are outside and inside. They have to be dealt with separately. But you can do this. 5, it's underneath the radical sign. This is underneath the radical sign. So you can do something with that. 3 times the square root of 5 times the square root of 5. What is 5 times 5? You can combine them together because you go back up to here. You can pull them apart or you can put them together. 5 times 5 is 25. The square root of 25 is 5. So 3 times the square root of 25, which is 5. The answer then is 15. So there, you can take this complicated mess and come out with an exact answer. Whereas before, sure, you could punch it in your calculator and it would tell you, but you didn't understand how it got that. But there it goes from simplified out, actually multiply it, and you get 15 there. All right, then example D here, you have the 5 and 2 outside the radical sign, and you have the 2 3's inside. So you can multiply the 2 numbers on the outside, and you can multiply the 2 numbers on the inside. As long as they are in the same place, in the same house kind of or area, you can take care of them. So 5 times 2, they're both outside, is 10. And what is 3, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3? It is 9. 10 times the square root of 9, well, you know that this is 3, so your answer then comes to 10 times 3, which is 30. So this right here equals out to this simplified answer, which is 30. All right, hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can rewatch this and yeah, do your best. Contact me if you have questions.